It's all an act.
He wears that beard to intimidate people.
No, it's that way when I shave it, I just look younger, you know.
Trying to look old and distinguished and all that.
And then that way when I shave, I look younger. You know, I'm getting ready to hit 55 here in a handful of days. Yep. The 25th, yep. Yeah, and the more of y'all I know, the more I begin to appreciate it.
Okay, John, I'll be 77 my next birthday.
We really? Oh, wow. Well, you look like you're probably in your late 50s, but I'm guessing you're probably 87.
88.
Oh, wow.
That is a surprise.
That is, yeah.
But Tommy's going to be 73 on this one.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm old. Like you, I'm looking at it today with that age.
Yeah.
You hold your age well. Hold your age well. Jack, you do too. I'm not.
I just think all this line going on in this
I'll leave on that note.
Yeah,
Make sure he's good to go here.
you talk about ages, little eyes do pop out.
Like them and golf stories and fish stories, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's 3 categories you better watch.
I've tried to break that up from line.
He's working on it.
Good luck with that.
You're off. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing fine.
Wonderful. Everything seems better once we get here, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
It just seems more sure.
Worship everybody, you know. Try to cheer you up. You're good.
This is when you get to come to the house of the Lord.
That's a blessing.
It is.
Festival
Aren't
of
we
Booths.
really are blessed?
At the end of
Yeah,
his
for us to
Festival of Booths.
have found
Now you, when you start Spain,
the real truth is that such a blessing.
On page 4.
Such a blessing. Not everybody.
You know, not everybody has that in their
It's the biggest blessing you may
Question
have.
5.
I was,
To the Festival of
I
Booths.
had never heard
And
of
that's
it.
his festival.
Really?
Or Tabernacle.
Well, you were I forgot the book.
They told me, I can't remember now.
And that's done 76. Name the festival.
Yeah, you know how Kelly is, you might just throw a little scribble on there. I couldn't find it.
Do anything for me. I want to see it. He showed me a whole
But that's on every day.
Just call, ask, that's your
version of what he had to do with a trooper.
Pentecost.
Right.
The very night,
Feast
it was
of
in the evening, got to working nights. And it was that evening that he converted me the first time. And I was baptized late at night.
Yeah.
Because it was, I could see it. And it was not something he just was telling me.
There's another
He
one
stepped
come back.
with the scripture of God. And I guess the Holy Spirit convicted me. I was
How do you
baptized.
feel today?
Well, I think I'm back. Just, I'm completely well.
Man, we missed you last time.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
I thought so.
Was it
I
you?
have been
Well,
looking
I
forward to
yeah.
We missed you.
All right. But, thank you for that.
Yeah.
I missed you
One thing I
too.
like about this class is when everybody comes in, they're all smart.
Well, I know.
When they leave, they're all smart. Ah, you do too. Your eyes show it.
I like your ass.
And I was,
Huh?
wondering about that.
Your eyes are
I
laughing.
don't know if that's a good thing or not.
No, I said, I like your him laugh.
Oh.
You fire my teeth fell out, right?
That would be fun.
One day, they don't know how to play, he said something, and I laughed, I said, I sounded like crazy.
I started to look at it Thursday when I was a kid.
And here comes it.
I'm here.
Yeah, I heard you about your sister-in-law.
Yeah.
What?
Your sister-in-law.
Well, I sent an email message out last week that she passed away last Thursday afternoon. Yeah.
I heard about the email.
Actually, she passed away Friday morning. Well, no. I guess it was Thursday. Yeah, it's Thursday afternoon about. Yeah, it's Thursday afternoon about 4:30. She passed away. Yeah. And
I heard about the email.
Does she live here?
yeah, they live down there at the independent living called Clayton Independent Living on Santa Fe. So, a real nice place. It's a small place. It's independently owned, and so I've told Florence many times. I said I'd gladly move in there. They've got 2-bedroom apartments and everything. Yeah, and it's on Santa Fe. Yeah, called Clayton Independent. It's just south of that Sonic, and I forget, they only have like, I think 26 apartments. Some of them are full kitchen apartments. And the one they live in is a 1-bedroom apartment. 3 meals a day, telephone, and cable for television. Everything is there. Yeah, he'll stay there for another. He said he's got enough money to live there another year, and I told him, I said, well, as long as you can stay there, we'll make sure you have enough money. So, but I did advise him that now that she's passed on, because he wouldn't get out as long as she was there, I said, now you need to get out and socialize with the people there. And I said, you need to find some people, because he likes to play dominoes. I said, find some people there that play dominoes with you. And I said, it wouldn't hurt you to get out with that walker and walk up and down that hallway twice a day. He says, yeah, that's good advice. And
How old is he?
I think he's 88. But and the truth is that the two of them never did really take care of their health. And a lot of that's because he preached at small congregations, and so they didn't have a lot of retirement money, and they're primarily living on Medicare. And of course, they had that 5 acres and the farm out there. They auctioned that off, and so they came up with enough money to live there for about 5 or 6 years with the money they had. If he ends up going to a nursing home eventually, Medicare will pay for the first 100 days if it's prescribed by a doctor. And then after that, they have to pay their own funds. And once that runs out, then they will help you apply for Medicaid. And Medicaid will pick it up.
My brother's at a nursing home in Fort Smith now, and I don't know why. His wife, they've given all their money to their children down through the years.
Well, in some ways, that's a smart thing to do. Like, each one of the children out there had 7.5 acres of mineral rights. And so I told him Friday, I said, I'm going to do some checking for you, but I said, you need to sell those mineral rights to your son, because if you give them to him and you end up in a nursing home within 5 years, they can still take those mineral rights away from the son, because they're going to take all the assets that he has left to help pay for the nursing home. And nursing homes are not cheap. They're about $6,500 a month.
Yeah.
So right now it's costing
That's highway robbery.
It seems like.
Well, it is, but when you consider that you have to have nursing care, that they're going to give the medication to them around the clock, they're going to bathe them and all that, plus the meals, and there's usually, I mean, I can speak from experience. When I broke my leg and I had to, Medicare insisted that I go to Bradford Village, which is not where I wanted to go.
Now, was that a nursing home or assisted living?
It's both. Bradford Village at one time was owned by the church. The college, I think, owned it. And they since sold it off. They have some independent apartments there at Bradford Village, but the actual home itself is assisted living and or nursing home. And they had nursing home patients there. But in the assisted living, what they do is, and even in the nursing home, they have a doctor that comes there twice a week to check on patients. And I know this is getting into class time, but while I was there, they switched my blood pressure medication, the doctor did, without even talking to me. And he put me on a beta blocker. And when he came in, I asked him, I said, why did you change my medication? He said, well, the one you was on increased your potassium level, and your potassium level was elevated. I said, well, do you check a patient's records at all before you make decisions on their medicine? He says, why? And I said, because I have bradycardia and beta blockers slow the heart rate. He said, oh, we got to get you off that right away. I said, no, you don't. I'm getting out of here tomorrow, and I'll get my doctor to take care of it. So I'm a firm believer you've got to manage your own health care. If you don't, and you let these people, they're not gods, and if you don't take charge of your own health care, they're going to make mistakes. So anyway, enough said on that. My wife is not here today. She's taken the death of her sister kind of hard, but she's also had a lot of pain. She moaned all night long from pain. So that's the only one I know that is not here today. So want to keep her in our prayers. Ron, you want to lead us in prayer this morning?
Holy Father in heaven, we're thankful to you for this Lord's Day, and thankful for the opportunity we have to come before you and worship and prayer and come before you in our studies of your holy and divine word. Thankful, Father, for the studies we're making in the book of Deuteronomy, and pray you be with Dale as he presents his studies for our learning, and be with us as students, that we would make application of the things we learn, the principles we learn from your holy word. We're thankful, Father, for the redemption we enjoy in your Son, our Savior, Jesus Christ. We're thankful, Father, for the hope of heaven that this holds out for us as we remain in this life faithful to your word and will. We're thankful, Father, for all the saints make up this local congregation. Pray on behalf of those who are not able to be with us this day. Pray you especially be with Florence and her family as they mourn the loss of Mary. And pray you be with Jay also as they go through this time of trial. We're thankful, Father, for all the many blessings of life itself, the power you've given us to enjoy life. And pray, Father, that we'll live day by day in accordance with your will. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen. All right, we're in Deuteronomy, the 16th chapter, beginning at verse 13. We're going to talk about the Feast of the Tabernacles this morning. And we'll finish up the 16th chapter this morning and look at the questions. But let's read verses 13 through 15. And Isaac, since you've been sick and you haven't been here for a time or two, we'll let you start.
You shall observe the Feast of the Tabernacle 7 days. When you have gathered from the threshing floor and from your winepress, and you shall rejoice in your feast, you and your son and your daughter, your male servant and your female servant, and the Levite, the stranger and the fatherless, and the widow who are within your gates. 7 days you shall keep a sacred feast the Lord your God in the place where the Lord chooses. Because the Lord your God will bless you in all your produce and in all the work of your hands, so that you truly rejoice.
All right, this goes back to Leviticus, the 23rd chapter, beginning at verse 33. It's, as read here, the Feast of Tabernacles, but it's also called the Feast of the Booths, depending on what version you look at. And this was to be conducted on the 15th day of the 7th month, which was Tishri, the first day of the feast. The 15th of Tishri was to be a holy convocation, and the people were to do no work. 7 straight days were to keep a sacred feast to God, and then on the 8th day they were to close the feast with another holy convocation. The Feast of Tabernacles was another time of rejoicing then, due to the harvest of grain and wine that God had blessed them with. Any comments on the Feast of Tabernacles? I know you probably had Leviticus there, but I'll let you read Deuteronomy. All right, so 3 times a year all male Jews shall appear before God. This is Deuteronomy, the 16th chapter, verses 16 and 17, John.
Three times a year shall all thy males appear before the Lord thy God, in the place which he shall choose, in the feast of unleavened bread, and in the feast of weeks, and in the feast of tabernacles, and they shall not appear before the Lord empty. Every man shall give as he is able, according to the blessings of the Lord thy God, which he hath given thee.
And notice the scriptures that John just read here, that again we see that phrase that this shall take place before the God in a place where God chooses. Not where man chooses, but where God chooses, at the Feast of Unleavened Bread, at the Feast of Weeks, and at the Feast of Tabernacles. And they shall not appear before the Lord empty-handed. So, they were required then to assemble at the temple of God in Jerusalem to remember their bondage and affliction in Egypt, and to give God thanks for not only his deliverance, but also for the blessings of the life they enjoyed in Canaan. Now at this point, remember that they're in the wilderness and everything, and so this tabernacle will move, but eventually it will be in Jerusalem. And God chooses the place then. To express their thanksgiving, the Lord commands that they do not appear before Jehovah empty. Each attending man was to give as he is able. All of these instructions are mere copies or shadows of New Testament worship. Our Passover lamb, obviously, is Jesus Christ. Let's see, 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7. Ron?
Therefore purge out the old leaven, that you may be a new lump, since you truly are unleavened. For indeed Christ, our Passover, was sacrificed for us.
Okay. And we know that Jesus Christ has delivered, or God has redeemed us from the bondage of sin. Look what Paul said to the church of Colossians in Colossians, the 1st chapter, and verse 13. Chuck?
He hath delivered us from the power of darkness, and conveyed us into the kingdom of the Son of his love.
And this is the same thing we read in Deuteronomy. In Deuteronomy, the 7th chapter, verse 8, and also Deuteronomy, the 16th chapter, verse 12. Jack, I'm sure you're already there at 7 and 8.
But because the Lord loves you, and because he will keep his oath which he will swear to your fathers, the Lord has brought you out with a mighty hand, and redeemed you from the house of bondage, from the land of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And you want to read that one?
Now, I'll let Pat read 16 and 12.
And you shall remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and you shall be careful to observe the statutes.
Okay. So this is the same thing. The Old Testament is a shadow of the New Testament. We assemble on the first day of the week. We know that by reading Acts the 20th chapter, verse 7. Okay? And we do this to worship God and to learn. Karen, you want to read Acts 20, verses 7 through 11?
Yeah, okay. Now in first day of the week, when the disciples came together to break bread, Paul, ready to depart the next day, spoke to them and continued his message until midnight. There were many lamps in the upper room where they were gathered together, and in a window sat a certain young man named Eutychus, who was sinking into a deep sleep. He was overcome by sleep, and as Paul continued speaking, he fell down from the third story and was taken up dead. But Paul went down, fell on him, and embracing him said, "Do not trouble yourself, for his life is in him." Now when he had come up, had broken bread and eaten and talked a long while, even till daybreak, he departed, and they brought the young man in alive, and they were not a little comforted.
So we obviously assembled together for several reasons. One, to worship God, to learn, two, to give thanks through prayer and giving of our means. 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verses 1 and 2, Donna.
Now concerning the collection for the saints, that I direct the churches of Galatia, so do you also, on the first day of every week, each one of you, to put aside his state, as he may prosper, that no collections be made by him.
Okay, and we also look at 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 7. Isaac?
So let each one give as he purpose in his heart, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver.
And we also assemble together to remember his deliverance and our redemption through the Lord's Supper. 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 23 and 24, John.
For I received of the Lord that which also I delivered unto you, that the Lord Jesus, the same night in which he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks, he brake it and said, "Take, eat, this is my body, which is broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me."
Okay. Now, I'm just going to offer a little thought here. And I don't want to make a big deal out of it, but when we assemble together, we assemble for specific purposes, don't we? We know we came together to worship God. We know we came together to learn. We know we came together to offer prayer and thanksgiving. We know we came together to sing songs, to teach and admonish one another. Another part of that, my concern is, and I know other brethren have the same concern, is sometimes we sing songs not thinking about the meaning and what we're teaching, but we sing it because of the beauty of it. And I think that's wrong. When R.J. first produced this psalm book, if you remember the old psalm book, and we have some copies of it there, a lot of the psalms had no music to them. They were there, but they had no music. Now, this psalm book, we have music, notes, and everything to every song, which is good. But sometimes songs are picked for the beauty of them and not for the meaning and what we're teaching. And I think we need to be careful with that. The other thing I think personally that we need to be careful of, song leaders have a habit of when they get up there to lead the song prior to the Lord's Supper, there's 9 times out of 10 the words help us to remember or help us to prepare for the Lord's Supper. My thought is that we should have come prepared to begin with. And so I don't think those words are necessary. But that's just my thoughts. You may have a different thought, and I'm certainly not going to criticize anybody for using those words. But there are a few songs in the psalm book when they're led, I will not sing. Do what?
I won't sing either.
I'll just give you one. I'll fly away. There's nowhere in the scripture that says I'm going to fly away. Now, in the Old Testament it says, if I had wings, but I don't have wings. I don't know how I'm going to be taken up in the sky. But one thing I do know is on a cloudy day, I certainly want to be in worship. But that's what we read in the book of Revelation.
I have just one little thing to ask you.
Yes, ma'am.
Since the Bible uses figurative language, isn't that okay if we sing figuratively too?
Well, it depends on what,
You have to
yeah.
figure it out, but I just want to throw that out there.
I mean, we're going to look at another scripture here, Ephesians, the 5th chapter, verse 19, and we could also go to Colossians. Let's see, whose turn is it to read that? Ron?
Ephesians 5:19.
Yes.
Speaking to one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody in your heart to the Lord.
Okay. And we find that in another place too, the Apostle Paul writing this. He gave specific reasons why we sing. And I think sometimes, like I say, we're singing songs without fully applying this idea that we're teaching and admonishing one another in those songs. And we just have to be careful with that. Anybody have any thoughts or add to it? Yes, Chuck.
I think when we come to worship God, that the songs ought to be worshiping God,
Yes.
praising God,
Yes.
not necessarily admonishing and teaching one another. We do that on Wednesday night, on that Sunday night, and on the fourth Sunday. But this is a worship period where God is the focal point.
Well, and I'd agree with you. I think based on what the Apostle Paul was saying here to the church at Ephesus and also to the church at Colossia, that we are to teach one another through those songs.
Sing and be happy is not a song of worship.
No.
See?
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
We ought to worship God rather than just sing any song.
Right.
Song,
There was one congregation that I attended years ago, and Elton Howard produced the book Songs of Church. I have one of those in my library. And this congregation went through that book, and they just put X's on every song that should not be sung in that congregation. And I thought about that because they were trying to make sure that the songs that was sung was a song that was praising God and that was teaching and admonishing one another. And you're right, there are some songs that are happy songs that have nothing to do with teaching. Yes, Ron?
Well, the distinction in your, you don't use the term, but what you're saying is entertainment.
Yeah.
Distinction between worshiping God and singing for entertainment
Yes.
purposes. One example I would give is the supplement
Yes.
has some that says sing to rounds. Now, everybody knows what rounds are, but we visited the congregation a couple years ago, 3 years ago or so, up north, and they had that, and that's what they did. They divided the congregation up into 4 sections, and it's like row, row, row your boat.
Yeah.
First section, row, row, row your boat, and it was so confusing. Half of them weren't singing to begin with, that it was all for entertainment purposes, rather than worshiping God.
yeah.
There are some congregations here. Well, there's congregations here in the Oklahoma City area that has that supplement. And I've gotten to where I don't even go to their gospel meetings anymore because 9 times out of 10, they're going to sing 3 or 4 songs out of that supplement. And I've had discussions with a couple of members here. I won't mention any names, but one member says, well, if we got that supplement, we could pick the songs that are appropriate to sing and eliminate the rest. What? Why get the supplement at all? We got 700 songs in this songbook, and we can't sing all of them.
We sing maybe 200 of them.
Yeah, if we sing that many. And so, what is the purpose of spending money for something that you don't need? I've gotten to a point that if someone brings that up, then I pull out Ellis Crumb's book. I like Ellis Crumb's book, songbook. Ellis Crumb went to the effort of contacting various publications and people who own the rights to songs to get permission to change the words to some of the songs to make them more appropriate in accordance with what the scriptures say. And I like Ellis Crumb's songbook. I like this one too. I'm not criticizing this songbook. But I'm at a point that when people bring up the supplemental songbook, I say, well, I like Ellis Crumb. Let's bring it up too. Let's buy it.
You can buy it just as cheap as you can the supplement.
Absolutely.
You have twice as many songs in it.
Absolutely. So, all right, I need to get off my soapbox here.
No, keep it going.
I learned about 5 songs before I'm starting to stick with those 5.
Well, we'll let you lead them sometime, Jack.
And I think that's a subject that needs to be discussed and thought about.
Oh, and it has been discussed a few times here. Fortunately, the supplemental songbook has not come up too much, although one person brought it up recently to John, and John immediately after services said to me, well, you're in trouble now. I said, why is that? Well, so-and-so wants to get the supplemental songbook. And I said, so? And he says, so it's okay with you if we get it? I said, no, it's not okay with me. We're still not going to get it, John. So, well, please understand that in the eldership we have agreed that if one person has an issue with something, then we all agree that that's an issue. Sometimes what I have to do with an elder or two, and I don't mean to, I hope you don't take this wrong, but I know for a fact there are at least 2 elders that would like to have that supplemental songbook, okay? And so I've had a discussion with elders before that if you go to someone who says that I would like to have something and you say, well, I'd like to have it too, but so-and-so disagrees with that. What you've done is split the eldership. And when you split the eldership, you cause divisions in the church. And I believe that's exactly what Paul was talking about to the 1 Corinthian brethren in the 1st chapter. There were people who were of Apollos, there were people who were of Peter, there were people who were of Jesus Christ, and so on and so on. And they were splitting the church up. And Paul said, this is wrong. You all speak the same thing. And so I've reminded from time to time that as an eldership, we all agree. And as long as we all agree, then the church is going to be sound. Yes, Donna.
I visited congregations that have a supplement. But okay, what's a supplement? It's confusing when you gotta get that book out there. It's all confusing. I don't like it when it's a supplement because you have to go change
Well,
it around all
yeah.
I got one better. What's a supplement book? I'm not even aware of this.
Well, you don't need to be aware of it.
Well, I'm in the dark. Oh, you all know what you're talking about.
Well, let me just put it shortly. RJ, and I loved RJ, okay, don't get me wrong. But there was pressure by young people to develop this supplemental book that has these feel-good songs in them. They're not, in my opinion, not scriptural songs. There are some scriptural songs in the supplemental, okay, that's not in this book. But there are a lot of songs in there that are feel-good songs, have nothing to do with worship, have nothing to do with teaching and admonishing. Like Ron said, it's 4-part harmony. And it's like Row, Row Your Boat. You know how to sing Row, Row Your Boat. Well, I know for sure there's at least one song in there that's exactly what they do. So if the soprano's singing one way and the alto's singing another way and the tenor's singing another way and the bass is singing another way, where's the learning? There's so much confusion in there, you might as well get up and wave your hands and say, oh, I'm saved today. I'm sorry. I hope I've been entertaining. Okay, enough of that. So let's move on to the next section here. Verses 18 through 21. You shall appoint judges and officers in all your gates. Remember, Moses is really laying the groundwork for these people to go into the promised land. And so Some of it, a lot of it, he's reminding them of things that's been said before, but he's giving more detail to these people because they have not personally seen it. They should have heard the stories, but they may not have heard the stories. And so here in verses 18 through 21, we have this appointing judges and officers in all the gates. Let's see, whose turn is it, Chuck?
You shall appoint judges and officers in all your gates, which the Lord your God gives you, according to your tribes, and they shall judge the people with just judgment. You shall not pervert justice. You shall not show partiality, nor take a bribe, for a bribe binds the eyes of the wise and twists the words of the righteous. You shall follow what is altogether just, that you may live and inherit the land which the Lord your God has given you. You shall not plant for yourself any tree as a wooden image near the altar which you built for yourself to the Lord your God.
In verse 22. Go ahead and read that.
You shall not set up a sacred pillar which the Lord your God hates.
Okay. So who was to appoint these judges? No.
Oh, no, the leaders of the tribes.
Yeah, they were to be selected by the people. They were to be just, not showing partiality, nor taking bribes. They were not to pervert justice, and they were not to allow altars to other deities to be constructed in the land. In some ways, that's similar to what we do in the New Testament as far as selecting elders and deacons. They are basically selected by the people, but the names are put before the people, and if the people have anything against that individual, they are asked to put it in writing and to sign their name to it. I can tell you that I had one letter written against me when my name was put forward, and that's okay. You're not going to please 100% of the people, but you should please, I would say, 99%. Because if you can't, then you're not going to be a very good leader. You're not going to be a very good deacon if you can't be recognized as following the instructions that the Apostle Paul gave to Timothy and Titus. Okay? Any thoughts on chapter 16? Any part of it? All right, let's look at the questions. Question number 1, in what month were the people to celebrate Passover? Abib, yes. Verse 1. What must they not eat with Passover meal? 11. And this was to be 7 days. You shall eat unleavened bread with it. That's Deuteronomy the 16th chapter, verse 3. Question 3. What should not be found in their territory for 7 days as they celebrate? No leaven. Verse 4. 4. Finish the verse. Then you shall keep the Feast of the Weeks to the Lord your God. Okay. Question 5. For how many days are the people told to celebrate the Festival of Booths? 7 days. And that's verse 13. Number 6. Name the festivals where the males are to appear before the Lord. Do what, John?
I had 15 on that.
You had 15? That's good too. Name the festivals where the males are to appear before the Lord.
Feast of the Weeks, Feast of Unleavened Bread, and the Feast of the Booths.
And Jack is right. It's verse 16.
Yeah.
So, all right. Let's look at some lessons that we can learn from chapters 15 and 16 then, real quick. First off, God commanded that the poor be taken care of in verse 11 of chapter 15. The Bible illustrates God's special attention and care for the needs of those who are poor. Let's look at a few verses. First off, let's go to Luke, the 19th chapter, verse 8. Jack, if you'll look at that. Pat, I'm not going to ask you to read the 12th chapter of John. But if you would read Acts 2, Acts 2:43 for me.
Luke 19:8.
Yeah, Luke 19:8.
Then Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, Look, Lord, I give half of my goods to the poor. If I take anything from anyone by false accusation, I'll restore fourfold.
Now, the only thing that verse tells us is that Zacchaeus here knew that he was responsible for giving a portion of his goods to those who were poor, and that's what he was saying there. Acts 2:43, Pat.
43. I can remember. Let me find it. 43. Then fear came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were done through the apostles.
Okay, and Karen, Galatians, the 2nd chapter, verse 10.
They desired only that we should remember the poor, the very thing which I also was eager to do.
Okay, and there are several scriptures that we can look at in the Old Testament that points out that those who overlooked the needs of the poor were condemned by the prophets. Let's look at a couple of them. Donna, look at Amos chapter 4, verses 1 through 5 for me. I'm sorry, not 1 through 5. Let's go back to Amos chapter 2, verse 7, and then Amos 4, verse 1.
Those who camp at the very depth of the earth on the head of the helpless also turn aside the way of the humble. And man and his father resort to the same girl in order to profane my holy name. Hear this word, you cows of Bashan who are on the mountain of Samara, who oppose the poor, who crush the needy, who say to your husbands, bring now that we may drink.
Okay. Isaac, jump over to the 8th chapter, verses 4 through 6. And John, I want you to read Jeremiah 20, verse 13. You already got there, did you? Okay.
Hear this, you who swallow up the needy, make the poor of the land fail, saying, when will the new moon be passed, that we may sow grain, and the Sabbath, that we may sow wheat, or trade wheat, making the ephah small and the shekel large, falsifying the scales by deceit. How far?
Through the, see,
4 through 6.
yeah, 4 through 6. Thank
That
you.
we may buy the poor for silver, and needing for a pair of sandals, even so badly.
All right, Jeremiah 20, verse 13, John.
Sing unto the Lord, praise ye the Lord, for he hath delivered the soul of the poor from the hand of evildoers.
Okay. So we see in the Old Testament, and so if you look at the Old Testament and you carry that over to the New Testament, this is actually why we see what we saw in Luke the 19th chapter, and also John the 12th chapter, Acts 2nd chapter, and Galatians the 2nd chapter. But God demands that we see the needs of the poor today, and it is a matter of Christian duty. We talked about that when we were looking at chapter 15. And let me emphasize that when we look at the New Testament, we're talking about the New Testament church. We're not talking about the needy outside the church. Now, that doesn't mean that as an individual we can't help the people outside of the church, but that's an individual decision. Same thing with individual orphanages, if you want to do that. We have to keep in mind that there are congregations that do provide funds to orphanages, okay? There are congregations that will have big boxes in their auditorium to drop canned goods and stuff that they will give to orphanages. Remember that most orphanages today are supported by federal and state. And as a result of that, when federal and state is involved, federal and state laws force an orphanage to do things and teach things that are contrary to the scriptures. And so we have to be careful as a congregation to support things like that, because if we do, then we are supporting things that are contrary to the scriptures. Now, that's just my thoughts, okay? So I threw that out, so you give me your thoughts on it. Nobody has any thoughts, or everybody agrees with me?
Politicians forget that the law was set up according to the Bible. According to God's laws, that And politicians completely forget that, absolutely forget that. They feel like, okay, I'm the prince up here, I'm over you peons. And then someone say, well, you voted for me, you put me in office to run your life for you, that's what I'm doing. So and not that, I assume that one of these days the government will stop allowing tax deductions on church donations.
Well, that may be true. And, I mean, here's why I say what I say about orphanages and even Christian colleges, because most of these Christian colleges are supported by state and federal now. What do you think's happening with state and federal? I'll give you an example. Today, the LGBTQ flag can be flown on every state and federal property that has been passed by law. But we cannot have the Ten Commandments. We cannot have Bible in school and all of these things. We can't have prayer before a sporting event. But we can have the LGBTQ flag there. And I like to watch the Hallmark Christmas movie. My mom and dad, my dad was didn't have a high school education. He fought in World War II. He worked 2 jobs just to try to take care of his family. And so when I think about that, what's going on with our country and how I grew up, I have a hard time with what's taking place today because of the liberality that's taking place. And these Hallmark movies, I love them because when I grew up, Christmas time was the only thing we had. But I have noted this year that at least half of those Hallmark movies and Lifetime movie have homosexuality in them. And that really bothers me.
It should.
Disney movies. You will not find a G-rated Disney movie anymore. It's got to be PG or PG-13. It's sad the way our country's going. And we wonder why these teenagers are killing people in schools. But yet, our federal government and our state government promote the idea of these video games that are nothing but violence. Kids are literally immune. Basically, they have a scar tissue about killing. It means nothing to them. In some cases, they just want to do it just to. There's a song that Johnny Cash sung about the fact that he shot a man just to watch him die. And I really think that's what teenagers are doing today. They shoot each other just to watch each other die. It's sad the way our country's going right now. And this is why in the church we have to be so close together and communicate with each other to encourage one another. Well, enough of my soapbox. I'm getting off on a soapbox today. Yes, Ron?
Well, regarding benevolence, there's 9 passages in the New Testament that address church funds being used, and it's specified needy saints.
Yes.
In all 9 passages.
Yes.
Not to go beyond what's written.
In fact, even Paul, when he's talking to the church of Thessalonica, which is one of them I'm sure you're referring to, 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verses 10 through 12, he specifically said if a person will not work, if they're slothful, they're a busybody, that they should not be helped in any way. There are also passages that Paul wrote that if they have family members that can take care of them, then the family members are responsible for taking care of them. So you're right, there's 9 passages, and I have some of them up here, but not all of them. And we'll not take time to look at all of them. Chuck?
When you make the decision that not to give to an orphan home that has gone federalized, I agree with that 100%. I'll back it.
Yeah.
But we need to remember what James 1:27 says, that the orphans and the widows must be taken care of.
Yes. I won't disagree with
that. That leaves it on an individual basis.
That's the point I would agree with.
And so, what am I doing to help the poor or the widows myself?
Yeah.
Individuals.
Yeah.
Are we taking care of the orphans?
I get and some of you may get them too, at least a monthly deal from Tipton Children's Home. If you don't know where Tipton's Children's Home is, it's out west of Altus. It's out there in no man's land.
Rescue.
Yeah, yeah. And so you're right. It is an individual responsibility. And I know that there are members here that give individually to various orphan homes and various Christian universities.
It's your responsibility as the elder to determine which one is right and wrong.
Yeah, put the burden on me, will you?
Well,
All right, well, that was the second bell, and we'll continue Wednesday night.